Hey, Sean, any update to the status of Jacob Harris? I know you got hurt in yesterday's game, and are there any other injury updates besides him coming out of last night?
Yeah, so just your typical bumps and bruises for guys, but unfortunately for Jacob, he got his ACL and his MCL, and so he'll go through some prehab, and then we'll eventually schedule surgery. But he'll miss the rest of the year, and kind of unfortunate on that freak accident. So bummer for Jacob.
Kevin.
Hi, Sean. Just to follow up on that, how did Matthew come out of it?
He's good. He's, we'll take it a day at a time with him. It was a mild kind of ankle sprain that you guys saw, but he came back in and competed well. And, he was sore today, but, expect him to be able to kind of take it a day at a time. But I think he'll be good to go.
Mm-hmm. And then the pressure that the Titans were getting on him, were they doing something that other teams hadn't?
No, it wasn't anything like that. You give them credit. They did a good job. There was some of the earlier ones were some longer developing plays where, we kind of just held it a little click longer, and I'd called some plays that probably took too long to develop. And then there were some other times where you see Simmons do a nice job of winning some isolated matchups. They had some 3-man movements internally, but wasn't anything different than what we had seen up to this point this year. You give them credit for the execution. And I do think, kind of like I had mentioned after the game, I think some of the play selections and just some of the spots I put our guys in, you expect to be better for them.
And then the last one from me, your Rams teams have been almost unfailingly good at bouncing back from disappointing games like this. How important has that been to your team's success? And what goes into it? What explains it beyond you're having the right message about not letting a team beat you twice and such?
Yeah, I think number one, I think it's about the players, Kevin. I think we've got the right guys that have the mental toughness and the resilience to be able to channel the frustration in the right direction. We can't do anything about the frustration that occurred last night. Let's channel it in the right direction and use it as a positive way to attack our preparation, while not being naive to some of the things that we need to fix and that I can do a better job of, or that we collectively can do a better job as coaches. But I think it boils down to the players, the mental toughness and the ability to be able to move on and not dwell on the past.
Jordan.
Hey, Sean. Just wanted to kind of sort of follow up. Cooper had some thoughtful, I thought, comments on the way that some of those too high things that they were playing, plus the pressure, was maybe changing what had previously. I mean, you guys, Matthew's been one of the best in the league against particularly like those too high concepts. And so what changed in terms of that pressure, making things different for how the plays were not only developing downfield, but how the decision-making process changes in that regard?
Yeah, I think, again, I think it goes back to kind of isolated plays in particular, but there was a handful of them where if you're going to play with a lot of deep presence, deep to short, you want to distribute the field in a manner that sometimes you might be able to hit some underneath completions where the catch and run ends up getting those explosives, as opposed to always feeling like they've got to be those in the air, kind of, those deeper yardage completed, in the air. And so it was a handful of different things. You look at the pressure they were able to create. Some of them were on some normal down and distances. Some of them were on some third down where they're, moving and twisting and doing some nice things to get us off different edges. And, every single play is kind of a little bit different answer. But I think the biggest thing is making sure that we're distributing the field in a manner that's reflective of being able to find completions. Guys are efficient running after the catch, and then we're playing within the timing and rhythm of it, and then a big part of it is some of the play selections and having a feel for the flow of the game. That's a thing that, you want to try to take some pride in as a coach is just understanding the landscape of, not exclusive to how the offense is going, but also how's the defense, how's the special teams playing, and what is it going to take for us to be able to win this football game and not leaving ourselves susceptible to some of the mistakes that occurred that I think we kind of, they made those plays, but I did think, we didn't help ourselves and kind of made it easier on them in that regard.
Yeah. And Sean, I mean, yesterday you were hard on yourself, obviously talking about some of the situational things, maybe some adjustments, play calls, things like that. Where didn't you adjust that you felt you needed to after you rewatched?
I think, the one call that stands out, I think the 4th and 1, when we were down 21-9, on a kind of similar play that we had run, we had Van on a crossing route earlier on. Anticipated what the defense was, to their credit, they did a nice job. Dupree did a nice job kind of reading out of it and forcing Matthew to kind of get off of his spot and throw the ball earlier. But I thought there was a lot of better plays that I could have selected there. And then it's not even necessarily the play selection as much as kind of just the ways that you can help communicate the intent of it. And, just being able to say, all right, we don't have to get everything back right here. We can patiently take completions and still get it in chunks. And if we're able to score in an efficient manner, it doesn't exclusively have to come through a 30 or a 40-yard gain. You can take 10 at a time or 6 and 5. And I think I just got a little bit impatient, and then like anything else, I think the execution and the standards that we have and that our guys have offensively and the confidence I have in those players, there were some instances where they could play better as well.
Sorry, Artist, just one more for me because it sparked by what you said about the patience thing. I think one of the more interesting things about what you guys did last year, and I think maybe what you may have learned last year as a coach in your development, your evolution, is when defenses are playing you that way, that patience, they're asking you to be impatient, essentially,
Sure.
or they seem like they are, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But do you think that that's worth revisiting in that regard, based on your comments earlier in terms of communicating that sometimes, they're going to dare you to be over assertive or do things that maybe you think are right in the moment, but ultimately the patient option is the one to pick?
Yeah, I think it's a good balance of kind of like, yeah, absolutely. And I think yesterday's game is a good reflection of that. I think overall, when you look at it in its totality throughout the course of the season, there's been a lot of instances where people are playing a deep to short type of thing. But there's still some different ways that you can try to manipulate coverage contours and get over the top. But, you've heard me say this before, Jordan, shot called doesn't necessarily mean shot taken. And I think it's the balance of, wanting to be efficient, but also explosive, and also knowing that the more times that you snap it, the more difficult it is to sustain drives and avoid the negatives and the different things. And that's what's really good. That's what the good defenses do. They make you snap it one more time. Credit to those guys. They did a nice job yesterday, and it'll be a good one for us to be able to learn from, look inward, and then try to make the necessary adjustments so that you're not having to make the same mistakes twice.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gary?
Hey, Sean. With the game on Monday night, how will your schedule change at all, or what will you guys be doing this week in terms of that extra day?
Yeah, so we'll have our players' day off tomorrow, which is kind of the standard approach, and then on Wednesday we'll bring them in, do some meetings and a lift, and then kind of get those guys out of there. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday will kind of represent what is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in a normal week for us. So we'll kind of just use, basically the easiest way to describe it is Wednesday will kind of be a bonus day where we'll lift them and get some extra meetings in and an early intro to the game plan.
With Matthew now dealing with an ankle issue, would you anticipate a similar kind of thing as in terms of last week of him not participating or being limited, or would you expect him to be able to go?
I think we're hopeful that he'll be able to practice this week. In what capacity? I can't answer that quite yet, Gary, but I'm hopeful that it's not something like last week where you're kind of basically not waiting until Friday to get going.
And I know we asked you about this last night, and I'm guessing it probably hasn't changed a lot, but in terms of Von Miller, how will you guys assess him, and what do you think? Are you optimistic that he's going to be able to play against 49ers?
Yeah, I think kind of similar to last night, like you mentioned, Gary. It's kind of one day at a time. He's doing a great job of attacking his rehab and his treatment with Reggie and his group. I know he's really tough, and I know he wants to get out on the field. And I think it is partly, my responsibility and our job to make sure that when we decide on that, it's when he's feeling good and he's feeling like the Von Miller that we've all grown accustomed to seeing, play with the speed and the explosion and the twitch that makes him such a special and unique player. So if he's able to go this week, that's definitely a positive for us. I think we will, we'll be careful, but I also think he's earned the right to be able to communicate that to us. but you're not naive to the fact that the bye is after that as well. And so we want to make sure we don't put him at harm's risk for setting himself back. And those are questions that I kind of asked Reggie and his group and defer to them on helping give me that clarity. And then we'll make a decision collectively with Von and myself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
Hey, Sean, losing Jacob a week after losing Deshaun, do you have any concerns yet about your depth at receiver, or do you feel comfortable with the three guys that play all the time with JJ and Ben behind them?
Yeah, you feel good about those guys. I mean, it's a bummer, Greg. I hate that for Jacob, and you were hoping to kind of get him a little bit more involved. What that means as far as maybe we start mixing in some different personnel groupings, and Kendall Blanton's played some snaps as of late. Maybe you get into some different stuff like that. Those are all things that we'll explore, but I do feel good about those top five, like you mentioned.
Okay. You have kept your personnel grouping so tight and using the same stuff and the same guys. Is there any, I guess you're saying it there, is that there's an interest in maybe expanding that, maybe doing different stuff in the second half of the season? There
is, you're always looking at that. I think you do want to be mindful of just the workload that takes on those guys when they're playing as many snaps. There's pros and cons to both. And so we will look at that. And I do think that mixing in, some different personnel groupings from time to time certainly doesn't hurt, even if you are a majority 11 personnel outfit.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
We'll wrap up with Maria.
Hey, Sean, what happened with Darrell Henderson Jr. last night? I know that he went out of the game at one point. He was questionable to come back, and then he did come back. What went on with him, and what is his status now?
Yeah, he's good. He tweaked his ankle a little bit, in those running backs. I mean, they take it's such a physical game, Maria. I kind of didn't even really realize it until there was a point in maybe even the second half. I can't remember particularly when it was, or specifically when it was, but I know they said, hey, he got his ankle dinged up, but I think he's going to come back. And then the next thing you know, he was able to finish the game. So I know, he was sore today, but not anything that, would pop up on the injury report that I expect to affect his practice status this week.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.